What if the person you once called your home slowly became a stranger sitting across from you? Claire used to think silence meant peace. She believed real love didn't need constant words, that comfort lived in quiet moments. But lately, that silence between her and Ethan wasn't comforting anymore. It felt like a cold wall neither of them dared to break. The air between them had changed, heavy with things unsaid. They sat at their favorite cafe, the one where Ethan once laughed so loudly that people turned to look. Now, only the faint hum of music and the sound of spoons touching porcelain filled the space. Claire looked at him, really looked, and realized he hadn't looked back in weeks. He scrolled through his phone, eyes lighting up at something on the screen. For a moment he smiled, a real smile, but not for her. Her chest tightened. It was such a small thing, that smile, yet it cut deeper than arguments ever could. She wondered who, or what, had replaced her in his thoughts. Later that evening, she stood by the living room window, staring at the city lights stretching endlessly into the night. Their apartment was beautiful, quiet, and perfectly decorated, but it no longer felt like home. Ethan walked in humming, a soft tune she recognized instantly. It was their song, the one they danced to the night he proposed, but hearing it now felt like hearing an echo from another life. He didn't notice her standing there. "Work was fine," he said automatically, as if answering a question she hadn't asked. His tone was polite, practiced, the kind people used with coworkers, not lovers. Claire forced a small smile. "Dinner's ready." They sat down at the table. The clinking of cutlery replaced conversation. Once, he used to tell her about every little thing. The annoying boss, the coworker who always wore mismatched socks, the dream he had about getting lost in a grocery store. Now there was nothing, only the sound of chewing, swallowing, and silence. When they finished, he stood up, kissed her forehead lightly, and said, "I'll be working in the study." He didn't see the tears she blinked away. Claire went to the balcony and looked up at the dark sky. It was full of stars, but none of them seemed bright enough tonight. She pulled her sweater tighter and whispered to herself, "How did we get here?" The memory of their early days flashed in her mind. Spontaneous road trips, late-night talks, the way Ethan used to look at her like she was the only person in the room. That look was gone now, replaced by distraction and polite smiles. The next morning, Claire made coffee for both of them like always. She placed his cup near the laptop where he was already typing, eyes fixed on the screen. "Thanks," he said without looking up. She hesitated before asking softly, "Do you remember when we used to sit together for breakfast?" He chuckled faintly. "Of course. Just been busy lately." Busy. That word had become his shield. Claire nodded and sipped her coffee, trying to hide the ache in her chest. She wanted to ask busy with what, but didn't. The fear of hearing an answer she couldn't bear kept her quiet. The hours passed slowly. Ethan left for work, leaving behind the faint smell of his cologne. Once her favorite scent, now just another reminder of distance. Claire spent the day cleaning, cooking, and trying to distract herself, but her mind kept circling back to that smile he'd given his phone at the cafe. By evening, she was pacing near the window again. She saw couples walking hand in hand, laughing, teasing each other. A part of her longed for that, the simplicity of being seen, heard, loved. When Ethan came home, she greeted him with a hopeful smile. "I made your favorite tonight." He paused at the door. "That's nice," he said, taking off his jacket. He looked tired, but not in the way she remembered. Not the "I worked hard today" tired. It was more like emotional exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying secrets. They ate in silence again. After dinner, she found him on the balcony, scrolling through his phone under the dim light. The glow reflected on his face, softening his features. Claire stood quietly behind him, just watching. She noticed how his lips curved slightly, the same soft, private smile she'd seen before. Her heart sank. He was smiling at something, or someone, but she wasn't part of it. She wasn't in his world anymore, just orbiting around the edges of it. When he turned and noticed her, he quickly locked his phone. "Hey," he said, pretending nothing had happened. "Hey," she replied, forcing a smile. The night grew colder. They both stood in the same space yet felt miles apart. Later, when Ethan fell asleep, Claire lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. She could hear his steady breathing, calm and peaceful. He looked content, maybe even happy, but she wasn't. She felt invisible, like a ghost still living in her own marriage. She turned to face him, studying the familiar lines of his face, the shape of his hands, the man she once thought she knew better than herself. A lump formed in her throat as a single thought crossed her mind. He's already leaving me. Just not out loud yet. The next morning, when she woke up, Ethan was already gone. On the counter was a small sticky note. "Didn't want to wake you. Have a good day." Such a small message, but it felt like a goodbye written in disguise. Claire sat at the table, holding that note between trembling fingers. The sunlight streamed through the window, touching her face gently, but it couldn't warm her. The coffee went cold as she whispered to herself, maybe love doesn't end with a fight. Maybe it ends quietly, while one person stops noticing and the other keeps hoping. That evening, she waited for him again. Not to argue, not to accuse, but to see if he'd noticed the change in her eyes, the sadness she no longer hid. When he finally walked in, smiling faintly, she asked softly, "Ethan, are you happy?" He froze for a second, surprised. Then he laughed a little too quickly. "Of course, Claire. Why wouldn't I be?" She nodded, smiling back. Just wondering. But deep down, she already knew the answer. As he turned away, humming that same old tune, their song, Claire felt tears rise again. Only this time they weren't from sadness. They were from realization. The man she loved was right there in front of her, but she was already losing him. And he didn't even notice. She stood by the window once more, whispering to the empty night, "Who are you smiling for, Ethan?" And as the city lights blinked below, her question hung in the air, unanswered, echoing softly like the fading heartbeat of a love that was slowly dying. What hurts more, the truth you fear or the silence that hides it? The next morning, Claire found a note near the coffee machine. It was written in Ethan's neat handwriting. "Don't wait up. Late meeting tonight." Her fingers lingered on the paper. He used to text her sweet reminders. Now he left short notes like business memos. She smiled bitterly and whispered, "Meetings don't last until midnight, Ethan." To clear her thoughts, she walked through the old park, the one where he had proposed years ago. The air smelled of rain and fallen leaves. A musician played their wedding song, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, remembering how his laughter once made her world feel safe. Now that memory felt like a dream she couldn't return to. Her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. A short message. "Don't forget to eat. Caring." But distant. A message you'd send to a friend, not a wife. By evening, the apartment felt emptier than usual. She cooked dinner for two out of habit, even though she knew he wouldn't come home before midnight. The ticking clock grew louder with every hour. She kept glancing at the door, waiting, not out of anger, but out of hope. When the door finally opened, Ethan walked in quietly. His tie was loose, his eyes tired, but there was something else, a faint scent she didn't recognize. It wasn't cologne, it was perfume, soft, floral, unfamiliar. He froze when he saw her awake. "You're still up?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Claire's voice trembled. "You smell different." Ethan hesitated, then looked away. "It's probably from work. Someone must have..." But he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. She nodded slowly, pretending to believe him. "Okay," she said softly. He whispered a quiet, "Good night," and walked past her into the bedroom. Claire stayed in the living room, staring at the half-empty wine glass she had poured hours ago. The clock struck 1. Somewhere outside, the city kept moving, lights flashing, people laughing, while her world stood still. She finally walked to the bedroom. Ethan was already asleep, his face peaceful, as if nothing had changed. She lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, her heart aching with the weight of everything unsaid. In the dark, she whispered to herself, "You used to come home smelling like rain and paper. Now you come home smelling like someone else's perfume." Her tears fell silently, one after another, until sleep finally took her. Not from comfort, but exhaustion. And just before she drifted off, one thought echoed in her mind, chilling and sharp. "He's slipping away and I can't stop it." How can someone look so alive while the person beside them is quietly falling apart? The next morning, Ethan surprised Claire by asking, "Want to grab breakfast together?" His tone was light, almost cheerful. Claire hesitated but agreed. Maybe this was his way of trying again. Maybe this was hope knocking one last time. They drove in silence to a small diner near the river, the same place they used to visit when money was tight, but love was endless. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air, and for a brief second, she felt something familiar. Maybe things could still be mended. But just as she started to believe it, the bell over the diner door jingled, and a woman walked in. Claire froze. She knew that face. Lily, Ethan's coworker. The same woman from the office event. The one who had lingered too long in conversations, laughed too easily at his jokes. Ethan's reaction said it all. His eyes lit up before he even realized it. "Oh, hey, Lily." His voice softened, a tone Claire hadn't heard in months. Lily smiled warmly. "Didn't expect to see you here." Claire sat quietly, her heart thudding in her chest. Ethan introduced her quickly, almost too casually. "This is my wife, Claire." Lily extended a polite hand. "Nice to meet you." Claire shook it with a small smile, her pulse trembling beneath her skin. She watched the way Ethan leaned forward slightly, how he laughed a little too much, how Lily's cheeks turned pink when he teased her. Every small gesture told a truth Claire didn't want to admit. He was already emotionally somewhere else. When Lily finally left, Ethan turned to Claire with an awkward laugh. "That was unexpected," he said, stirring his coffee. Claire stared at him. "She seems nice." "Yeah," he replied quickly, eyes flicking down. "She's great at work. Really smart." Claire nodded, trying to smile, but her chest ached. Every word he said about Lily felt like a quiet goodbye to her. The ride home was painfully silent. Claire looked out the window, her reflection blurred against the passing streets. She remembered how Ethan once used to reach for her hand while driving. Now his hand stayed firmly on the wheel. When they got home, he went straight to the study, saying something about emails. Claire stood in the doorway, watching him type, his focus unbroken. That same soft smile appeared again, the one she used to believe belonged only to her. It hit her then. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't even distant on purpose. He was simply happy somewhere else, and she was watching it happen in slow motion. As she walked away quietly, she thought, I used to be his favorite part of the day. Now I'm just background noise to his new beginning. How do you say goodbye to a person who still shares your house, your table, your air, but not your heart? Days passed, and the silence between Claire and Ethan became routine. They no longer argued, no longer tried. It was as if both had accepted that something precious had quietly died. Ethan still came home, still asked about her day, still smiled politely. But it wasn't love anymore, just habit disguised as care. One evening, Claire found herself cleaning the bookshelf when a small photo album fell to the floor. The cover was worn, the edges soft from years of touching. Inside were memories, their wedding, their first apartment, their laughter. She stared at one picture, Ethan holding her hand, both grinning at the camera as if the world had just begun. Her throat tightened. That version of them felt like strangers now. When Ethan walked in, he paused at the sight of her holding the album. "What are you looking at?" he asked softly. "Our beginning," she said, her voice almost a whisper. He sighed, sitting beside her. "Claire, I didn't mean to hurt you." She looked at him, eyes steady. "You didn't hurt me, Ethan. You just stopped seeing me." For a moment, the mask slipped, and guilt flashed across his face. He opened his mouth to speak but said nothing. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was final. like the last page of a story that had already ended. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan hummed quietly, and she realized she no longer recognized the man lying beside her. Love wasn't supposed to feel this lonely. At dawn, she made a decision. No shouting, no tears, and just quiet acceptance. She packed a small bag with a few clothes, her journal, and that photo of them laughing. She moved carefully, not wanting to wake him. But as she reached the door, Ethan stirred. "Claire?" His voice cracked, tired and confused. She turned. "Go back to sleep." He sat up, panic in his eyes. "Where are you going?" Her lips trembled, but she managed a sad smile. "I'm just doing what you already did, Ethan. I'm leaving." He stood, his face pale. "Claire, please," she shook her head gently. "You let go a long time ago. I'm just catching up." And before he could say another word, she opened the door. The morning light poured in, soft, golden, and freeing. She stepped out, feeling the cold air on her face, tears streaming silently. Behind her, Ethan stood frozen, realizing too late that he had watched love fade, not with anger, but with indifference.